Hello, my name is Aubrey. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to another episode of Recent Reads. Hello, this is Aubrey from the future. The audio for this video got completely messed up. This has never happened to me before. I record in GarageBand, and for whatever reason, again, I have no idea what happened, this is how the audio came out.
Hello, my name is Aubrey. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to another episode of Recent Reads.
So I did end up having to use the audio from the camera itself, which is not ideal, and I do apologize. I hope you will watch and enjoy the video regardless, but I just wanted to pop in here and let you know if it sounds a little off. That's why I've done my best to clean it up the best I can, but it still sounds like it came out of the camera, which it did. Thank you for your patience and understanding. So I have once again waited too long to do a wrap up. I got into a bit of a reading slump over the summer, and by reading slump I mean a period of really disastrous burnout. I have 16 books to discuss with you today. I'm going to try to get through them in a timely manner as best I can. Some of these I did read quite a while ago, so the details might be a little bit hazy. I'm going to do my best. But let's just go ahead and get started. First up, I have Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang by Kylie Lee Baker. I believe I read this back in April. This was the last book I read before my reading slump. So our story starts in New York City at the height of the pandemic. Cora witnesses her sister get murdered by a complete stranger who pushes her in front of a subway car and whispers the words, Bat Eater. Flash forward a year or so, and Cora's OCD is getting worse. She decides to kind of lean into it, and she gets a job as a crime scene cleaner. So while working with a small team of other cleaners, Cora notices a pattern of murders in Chinatown involving East Asian women and a string of bat carcasses that are being left at the crime scenes. They tell the police and the media that there might be a serial killer at large, but nobody takes them seriously or even seems to care. All the while, Cora is dealing with her own slipping sanity as a hungry ghost seems to be haunting her. So I really enjoyed this one. I thought the writing was really good, and as a horror book, I found it very effective. It was really creepy and gross and haunting. And as someone who's still pretty new to the genre, I'm finding that I'm really enjoying horror that uses horror as a tool to explore really taboo topics or gruesome, underrepresented parts of history, or that are getting into the dark, murky parts of human nature, and this book does all of those things. So we're dealing heavily with the racism experienced by Asian people in America during the pandemic. From outright acts of violence to microaggressions and discrimination. It can be a really hard read at times, and there were many instances where I was terrified for our main characters, not because of any supernatural ghosts or ghoulies, but because of white people. And can you imagine being terrified of a deadly disease going around only to also have an entire city, an entire country turn against you because you happen to be Asian? Even if you were born here, even if you've never left the country, even if you're not Chinese. Tensions were running so high, and there was so much fear and ignorance. I mean, there's still a fair amount of fear and ignorance, to be sure. But just especially in such a claustrophobic city like New York, you just really feel the danger that the characters are in just by existing. So I really liked Cora as a main character. I really related to her and just her oddness and awkwardness at the beginning of the story. She really doesn't know how to human. She really doesn't know how to interact with people or make friends. I also found her anxieties surrounding the pandemic and getting sick to be relatable. I mean, she is dealing with really intense OCD, but it was such a scary time. There's a level of that especially in the early days felt really, really relatable. She's also just a really layered character. If I remember correctly, she's half Chinese and half white. And so seeing her having to toe the line between those two worlds was a really interesting thing to do, especially in a novel like this that's so heavily dealing with race. Exploring feelings of not belonging in either world, but also feeling the only part of her that mattered was her Chinese half, because that's the part of her that she wears so plainly on her face. There are also a lot of really interesting themes about identity and heritage and family. I also really enjoyed the side characters quite a lot. Yeffy and Harvey are Cora's co-workers, and they add a lot of humor and color to an otherwise very dark story. Overall, I thought this was great. I gave this 4 stars. The only reason it didn't get 5 is because personally, I will say that I was much more interested in the serial killer plotline than the hungry ghost plotline, and for a while we do deviate and focus pretty heavily on the hungry ghost storyline. For part of the novel, I just wasn't sure where we were going. Like, the 2 parts felt really disjointed. Now, it does come together at the end really beautifully. The ending is poignant and topical and just like a gut punch. But the second half for me was just like a little bit too meandering for my taste. I think that like the 2 plot lines could have been woven together just a little better so that it doesn't feel like one plotline is completely abandoned. But otherwise, I thought this was a fantastic book and I would highly recommend it to any horror lover out there. Okay, next up I have 3 DNFs, and I'm going to try to talk about these pretty quickly. These were the books that I was trying to get through during my reading slump, and I'm going to blame the reading slump. All of these are books that I would really like to return to at some point, but they just weren't hitting at that particular time. So first up, I have Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. I got about 30% of the way into this. I was so looking forward to this, and so like I was fairly disappointed to not have been grabbed by it. So we're following the story of Good Stab, a Blackfeet Indian who gets turned into a vampire and is recounting his life to a Lutheran pastor. It was really slow. Like, it was so slow. I guess I was just hoping for something a little bit faster, a little bit more bloody and fun. And it was just really, really painstakingly slow. I was listening to this on audio and I was tuning out so hard. Like, I just could not pay attention. I would like to come back to it and try again, maybe with an audiobook, physical book combo. I just need to be in the right headspace to give it the time and attention that it deserves, because it is a book that I think requires a good amount of patience. Not really the best kind of book for a reading slump. Then I tried Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, and I got about 30% of the way into this one as well. So we're following a disabled Nigerian professor who has been trying to make it as a writer for years. After many failures and rejections and ridicule from her family, she finally decides to write a book just for herself. It's called Rusted Robots and it's a hit. She gets a massive book deal. The book is a bestseller and her life changes basically overnight. From what I remember, we are mostly dealing with interfamilial relationships. Our main character, Zelu, is super messy. I'm talking like a real piece of work. Like, she's brash and she's rude and she's angry. But there's also something kind of endearing about that, especially when like the rest of her family is also a piece of work. They're gossipy and judgmental, and there's a lot of opinions about how Zelu should be living her life. I was enjoying it, but I could also feel myself not giving it the attention that it deserved. This is another one I was trying to listen to exclusively on audio, and I just could not pay attention to it. I was having to back up constantly, and so I decided to softy enough this one as well, just because like I could tell it like was not what I was in the mood for, but I would like to try it again at some point. Okay, and then last in my little cluster of DNFs, I have First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. I was really hoping that something light and fluffy would help get me out of my reading slump, but alas. Alright, so Lucy wakes up in the middle of the night and overhears her daughter talking in hushed tones on the phone. And her daughter's like 11, so like too young to be talking in hushed tones on the phone. So fearing the absolute worst, Lucy takes the phone from her daughter, and turns out that she's on a live radio show. A romance hotline, in fact. Could you imagine? And so her daughter had called in asking for advice on her behalf because she's worried about her mom being lonely and being unwilling to date. The host of the radio show, Aiden Valentine, kind of brings her out of her shell a little bit. She eventually goes on this long and wistful tangent about how there's like no magic anymore and that dating apps are so dreadful. She just wants love to feel easy, you know? The conversation, of course, goes viral, and Lucy is invited back on the show as a segment to help find her love. I got about 40% of the way into this one. It was fine. Again, I'm blaming the reading slump. I just wasn't obsessed with it. Like, I really, really wanted to feel the way that I felt when I was reading like The Love Hypothesis or Beach Read. I just was not feeling that feeling. Like, it was cute and it was fine, and there wasn't anything about it that I like wasn't enjoying. It just wasn't as addicting as I'd hoped. And so I decided to DNF this as well. I don't usually DNF this much. It was just, yeah, I was like not in the mood to read, and so like everything I was picking up, I was like, this can't be a slog in any way. Like, it's either gotta get me out of the reading slump or like I'm not fooling with it, you know? But yeah, so next up is one that I did actually manage to finish. It's A Sign of Affection by Sue Morishita. It's a little volume of manga, which I thought might be something easy, something to help me get out of the reading slump. So we are following Yuki, a deaf college student who develops a crush on an intriguing fellow student. He speaks 3 languages, he's very well traveled, and he seems to, you know, maybe have a crush on her too. It was cute. It was more insta-love than I typically prefer, but to be honest, I'm in it more for the deaf representation than the romance. I also really love the art style. Like, it's such a beautiful, beautiful art style, which I always really appreciate. I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was fun enough. So yeah, I definitely think I would be interested in continuing and seeing if the story gets any better, but for what it was really cute. I would definitely recommend it to anyone who loves romance manga. Alright, next up I've got Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin. Shell Pines has hit rock bottom. She has just left her fiance, she's lost her job, and she's moved back in with her parents. When she sees a help wanted sign in a flower shop at her local mall, she decides to take a chance. She is immediately and inextricably drawn to the shop owner, Neve, who is beautiful and mysterious and alluring. But what Shell doesn't know is that there is a dark and sinister force at play in Neve's life. A sentient orchid named Baby is obsessed with Neve. He wants to consume her, and he will stop at nothing to eat the one he loves. This was such a weird one, and like not in a good way. I had such high hopes for this. Like, the cover is gorgeous. I am so obsessed with this cover. The synopsis made it sound like a sapphic Little Shop of Horrors, which I was completely here for, like with my whole body. I wanted dark, but with a splash of camp, you know, something that was just like self-aware. It fumbles the bag in so many ways and just makes so many bizarre choices. First of all, it's told from the perspective of Baby. Like, the plant is the narrator, which could have been interesting in theory, except that the story isn't just told through observations. Part of Baby's powers is that if he's around you, he can feel your feelings and I think even hear your thoughts, which creates kind of a confusing reading experience because he's so all-seeing and so all-knowing to the point where you will forget that he is the narrator until he interjects something or makes a little comment, and then you're like, oh yeah, the plant is the narrator. And even for me, I listened to the audiobook for most of this, and like, they got a male narrator, and even I forgot. And so every time he would interject something, I would be pulled out of the story and be like, oh yeah. So it was just a weird choice. I think it could have been handled better. Personally, I think that we should have just changed POVs. Like, a few chapters from Baby's perspectives would have been cool, but like, not the whole book. I also think that Baby in general was really underdeveloped. Like, we just don't get enough answers about him, like what he is, where he came from, how does he have the powers that he has. There's just this huge air of mystery surrounding him that we never get to explore, which is a bummer. And just in general, like, all of the characters are really underdeveloped. Like, I did not care about a single one of them. And the sapphicness that was hinted at does not hit. Like, Shell is definitely attracted to Neve, and Neve seems to be attracted to her back, but then Shell ends up like dating a dude for most of the book, and it's so random and it's so annoying. It's like, why? Why would you play us like that? There's a weird C-plot with Neve's ex who moves away but is still worried about her and is like checking in on her through a mutual friend. It does tie in at the end, but it felt so random and weird throughout the book. I just did not care about anyone, and there were so many weird choices, and it was boring. Like, a lot of this book was just really boring, which to me is like the ultimate sin that a book can be, is boring. Now, there were some interesting themes in here about being lost in adulthood, not knowing who you are or where you're going, how scary it can be when all of your friends are seemingly moving on without you, like getting married and having kids and successful careers. What happens when you fall off of the expected track? There was also some really interesting imagery surrounding this like rotting mall where most of the novel takes place. It's run down, the businesses are suffering, there's talk of the mall being torn down completely, it's forgotten, it's festering, and everyone else seems to have moved on from this mall, except for this like small core group of people who are still like holding on to its glory days. I definitely think something deeper and more interesting could have been done with that, but like as it was, I think the setting was probably my favorite part of the book. I ended up giving this 2.5 stars. I almost DNF'd it at several points, but one, I was originally just so excited about this that I felt determined to finish it no matter what, and two, because I had been DNFing so much else lately, I wanted to win, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I would skip this one if I were you. Alright, next up I've got Inuyasha Volume 1, and reading this was truly just the best self-care. So we're following Kagome, who is, you know, she's just like a normal high school girl. That is until she falls down a magical well in her backyard, and at the bottom of the well she drops into ancient Japan. There she discovers that she is a reincarnation of an ancient warrior, and that she has a destiny tied to a cranky half-demon named Inuyasha. Together they are trying to collect these crystal shards that have scattered throughout the land before other demons can get to them. So thus far it's very monster of the week, but it's also just really wonderful, so nostalgic for me. I watched a good bit of the anime when I was younger, but I've never read the manga. It's action-packed, it's funny, it's scary, definitely like very horror leaning fantasy. The romantic tension between Kagome and Inuyasha is just so delicious. Like, they fight, they bicker and banter, they are literally always exasperated with each other, but every once in a while they'll have a moment. Oh, it's so good. It's just like top tier. 5 stars from me. I'm almost done with volume 2. Just having the best time. Highly recommend. Next up, I've got The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern by Linda Cohen Loigman. This is a multi-timeline novel, part historical fiction, part second chance romance with just like a sprinkle of magic. So we're following Augusta, a now 80-year-old pharmacist who's been forced into retirement. At her new retirement community, she runs into the last person on Earth she ever thought she would see again. The love and loss of her life, Irving Rivkin. The delivery boy from her father's old pharmacy, and the boy who broke her heart 60 years ago. From there, we follow Augusta in the present, dealing with Irving being back in her life, old feelings bubbling up and resentments, while also flashing back to 1920s Brooklyn, exploring Augusta's teenhood. The grief of losing her mother, the mysterious and maybe a little bit witchy great Aunt Esther who comes to live with them, her complicated relationship with her father, the confusion and excitement of first love. I have to say, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was well written, I thought it was well paced. There were a lot of really interesting dynamic relationships at play. So the relationship that Augusta has with her dead mother, with her grieving father, with her strange aunt who could never ever replace her mother, but then also the tense relationship between Augusta's father and great Aunt Esther because they have different methods of healing. Augusta's sweet budding relationship with Irving in the past versus the vitriol that she seems to hold for him now, and the slow uncovering of like what the hell happened there. And finally, Augusta's interest in pharmacology and healing, learning from both her father and her great aunt. This ended up being such a lovely read. It's the kind of book that reminds you that it's never too late and you're never too old. Not for love, not for happiness, not for overcoming fears or becoming a new person. My one big complaint with the novel is that the 80-year-olds felt more immature than their teenage counterparts. Now, I know that that's not entirely unrealistic, but it was a little frustrating to read about. However, I still gave this a very solid 4-star. I absolutely loved it. I especially really enjoyed the historical parts, and I would highly recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. Next, I read The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark. In the summer of 1975, 2 teenage siblings are found dead in their home. The only surviving sibling, Vincent Taylor, is widely believed to be the murderer, even though he was never convicted. Decades later, his infamy has led to an outstanding career as a horror author. His only daughter, Olivia, a ghostwriter, has done everything in her power to distance herself from him both professionally and personally. However, when she inadvertently tanks her own career by bad-mouthing a fellow author on a writing panel, she is forced into a job that she wants absolutely nothing to do with, ghostwriting her father's last novel. But when she arrives at her father's house to start work on the novel, he tells her that it's not a novel at all, but rather an autobiography of sorts. After 50 years of silence, Vincent Taylor is finally ready to talk about what really happened that night in 1975. But here's the real kicker, and it's not in the synopsis, but I'm going to tell you anyway because it makes things so much more interesting. Her father is suffering from a degenerative brain disease, so his recount of things that happened is not only unreliable, but oftentimes completely incoherent. And so we watch Olivia having to parse through her father's notes and mad ramblings. She has to work out what's true and what's false, and she has to corroborate things that he said with people from the past who were there, and figure out clues and like little cryptic things that he's written in the margins. This was so addicting. Like, when I tell you I could not put this book down. So I was reading this while spending the weekend with my parents, and so like I couldn't sit down and binge it, but like anytime I had a spare second, and I mean a spare second, I was reading this book. Like, you know, 2 minutes while I'm heating something up in the microwave, or like, oh, my mom needs like another minute to go get ready. Like, I would have brought this in the shower with me if I could. I could not get enough of it. The mystery was so good, it kept me guessing until the end. It unravels the way that any good mystery should. I really enjoyed Olivia as a main character, and her really like messy and complicated relationship with her father was probably one of the most compelling parts of the book. There are multiple timelines, a few different points of view, one of which I won't spoil but ended up being an absolute delight. It was just really good, like a perfect mystery thriller. I gave this 5 stars. Typically anything that can make me read that hungrily gets an automatic 5 stars, and like this had me hooked beginning to end. Highly recommend if you need a good thriller in your life. Next up, I have What Kind of Paradise by Janelle Brown. Our main character Jane lives an isolated, Thoreau-esque lifestyle in a cabin in Montana with her father. They pretty much fend for themselves, hunting and growing vegetables and chopping wood, etc. Jane's father is a little bit eccentric, a little bit intense about philosophy. He has her read all of the great 19th century philosophers, and he's a little bit of a philosopher himself, publishing articles about the dangers of modern technology. However, it's the mid-1990s, and in this new age of the internet and home computers, Jane's father finds that his words and his worldviews are not finding the right audience. Afraid of becoming completely irrelevant, he brings home a home computer as well as a book on coding. And while this goes against everything that he's taught Jane, he promises her that it's for the greater good, for the message. He has Jane learn to code, and she creates a website for his essays and ideas. However, having access to the internet opens up a whole new world for Jane, and she discovers that her father may not be the man that she thinks he is. She ends up fleeing to San Francisco in search of someone that I will not spoil who might be able to help her and give her some answers. So I really love books about the wilderness, especially books about like roughing it in the wilderness. And I was also really intrigued by the mystery, like what the fuck is up with her dad, right? This was another pretty addicting read. Like even after you find out what's going on, the story morphs into something else, but I always felt like there were little twists and turns to keep me on my toes. At its heart, this is a story about a father and a daughter, the lengths that we will go to protect the people we love, despite how problematic they may be. It's also a story about finding yourself, breaking free of expectations, carving your own path, and becoming your own person. So I had two major qualms with this novel overall. One is that I felt like the book really could have played up the fish out of water elements a lot more. This girl has been raised in the woods her whole life. She has exactly one friend that she sees occasionally. She has no formal education, but she fits into San Francisco life pretty seamlessly. Like, yes, there are some hiccups and moments of naivete, but of course there are a few jokes thrown in about her not understanding pop culture references. But overall, that part of the novel just felt like a little bit too easy. And maybe it's just because I love the fish out of water trope, but I just really would have liked a little bit more of that, I guess. So my second qualm is that the book is wrestling with two extreme ideas. So I won't get into spoilers, but like on one side we have Jane's father, who is very against technology and believes that technology will be the end of mankind. And then on the other side we have eventually another character like praising technology as the salvation for mankind, the natural like next step in evolution almost. You know, humans becoming so intertwined with technology as to become cyborgs. And I guess I just felt like there was room for a much more nuanced conversation. Like neither of those options really appeal to me. I think neither of those options appeal to most people. You know, I definitely think the conclusion of the novel bridges the gap, but you know, it's like the very last page. And I guess I just feel like that could have been part of the bigger conversation. But overall, I did really enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars. Like I said, I found it very addicting. The story is really intense. Like there are some pretty big stakes here. So, you know, I would say that it's more general fiction, but it kind of leans towards the more thrillery side of general fiction. And definitely if it sounds interesting to you, I would recommend picking it up. And then I read Blackwood's Blue Sky by Eowyn Ivey. In this we are following Birdie. Birdie is a young single mother. She is a waitress at an Alaskan roadside lodge. It's a tough town. It's a tough life. She is barely holding it together. She leaves her daughter home alone more often than she should. She drinks too hard on her shifts and does some hard drugs that she probably shouldn't. But sometimes Birdie just wants to feel alive. She wants to be free of the burden of it all. She doesn't make enough money, she doesn't have enough support, and she'll probably never be free of the life that she has right now. That is until she strikes up an unlikely friendship with the town recluse, Arthur. Arthur is a little peculiar. He only shows up in town at the change of the season. He doesn't talk much, and when he does, it's always in the present tense. He doesn't seem to eat or drink anything besides tea, and on top of that, he's missing an ear and he has a large scar across his face. Birdie finds herself falling in love with Arthur's quiet strangeness, and so when it's time for Arthur to return to his cabin in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness, Birdie decides that she and her daughter will go with him, seeing this as a fresh start and a chance for her to be a better mother. So, this was a 5-star book until it was a 1-star book. Let me start by saying that the writing is absolutely gorgeous. Like the descriptions of the Alaskan landscape and the wilderness, the flora, the fauna, like they're gorgeous. Like they're absolutely gorgeous. Lyrical and evocative. Like I felt like I was really there, tasting the water and hiking through the woods and like spotting the little birds and creatures. Like so beautiful. I enjoyed all of the characters up until a certain point, which I will talk about later. But like at first, I really felt for Birdie. Like, yes, she was a super messy, sometimes terrible mother, but I also felt how much she loved and cared about Emmeline, her daughter, how worried she would get, how protective she could be. I felt like there was a good mom in there somewhere that just needed some better circumstances to bring that out of her. Being a young single mom is so hard, and so even while she was unlikable, I was still rooting for her to get her shit together. I also really enjoyed Emmeline's chapters. I think some people, she's gonna come across as really annoying, but most of the time I really liked it. I found her voice to be very whimsical and childlike. She's clearly very imaginative, and I just liked being in her perspective. Just like seeing how she did or did not understand things, how she would use her imagination to fill in gaps and rationalize. But of course, sometimes she was really annoying, and I think that was the point. Like, sometimes kids can be fucking annoying. It helped me sympathize with Birdie more. Like, it's tough. Arthur, I also really enjoyed. Like, having him speak in only the present tense was definitely a weird choice, but I feel like it added to the strangeness, to the magic of it all. I should add here that this book is magical realism and that Arthur, spoiler alert, turns into a bear. It's revealed pretty early in the book, like he's a bear on the cover. It's not really that big of a spoiler. I like a quiet, misunderstood character, and so I was endeared to him from the beginning. He doesn't have that much of a personality outside of that, but he doesn't really need one. It's a fairy tale. So now I fear I am gonna have to talk spoilers. I don't typically do spoiler sections in my wrap-ups anymore, but for this one, in order to properly express why I hated this so much, like, I'm gonna have to talk spoilers. It was the last third that really went wrong for me. This book gave me such whiplash. So yeah, if you don't want spoilers, I will try to remember to put a timestamp, but if not, just skip ahead until you see this spoilery sign go away. Okay, so for context, I feel like it is important to reiterate that I love stories about the wilderness and roughing it in the wilderness. I especially really love stories about how spending time in nature is transformative. Like, that's just a theme, a trope that I really enjoy. The second piece of context is right here on the inside flap. Eowyn Ivy returns to the mythical landscape of Alaska with an unforgettable dark fairy tale that asks the question, can love save us from ourselves? I am also partial to a transformative love story. Doesn't have to be romantic love. Familial love can be just as powerful, if not more so. But I'm gonna put a pin in that, and we're gonna circle back to it in just a minute. Okay, so Birdie decides to take her 5 or 6-year-old child to a cabin in the middle of the wilderness with no electricity or running water to go live with a man that she has not known that long. You think child endangerment. And I hear you, okay? I think that's valid. I, however, kind of see the vision. Birdie is currently stuck in a cycle of poverty that she will likely never get out of. And because of that poverty, she's committing acts of child endangerment already. So she leaves Emmeline home alone at night so that she can go work her shift. She could work the day shift, but that won't earn her nearly enough tips to stay afloat. And then who would watch Emmeline during the day? Presumably there is no money for a sitter. There's a mention of grandparents nearby who are getting increasingly annoyed at having to watch Emmeline because Birdie can't just like magically figure that shit out. So she really has no village. It's just her raising a child on her own with no higher education at 26 years old, meaning that she had Emmeline at 20. A huge part of Birdie's backstory is that she and her sister were abandoned by their mother and were raised by their grandparents. And despite Birdie's longings to sometimes be her own person and have things for herself, she refuses to be like her mother and abandon Emmeline. So when Birdie says, hey, let's go escape this cycle. Let's go live outside of money and outside of societal expectations, away from the drinking and the drugs and the partying, where I can be present and I can be the mom that you deserve, where you can have a magical, adventurous childhood. I see the vision, okay? I see the fucking vision. This is supposed to be a fairy tale, and so I trust the author. And the frustrating thing is that it was working. So Birdie and Emmeline and Arthur get to the cabin, and the cabin is all dirty because like it hasn't been lived in a while. And so Birdie gets in and she like busts her ass and like gets this cabin livable. She sweeps everything up and she like scrubs all the rust out of the pots, and like she's cooking every meal from scratch because they have no refrigerator, like they have no way to store anything. She's hauling water in buckets from the river to heat up, and she's like chopping cutting firewood. And so like in terms of physical labor, this is like a considerably more difficult way of life. And Birdie rises to the challenge like a fucking champion. Like couldn't be me. Like no running water, no electricity, like could not be me, okay? But Birdie living her best life. Emmeline gets to spread her wings and be this imaginative kid. You know, she's running around and playing pretend and just like having a grand old time. Arthur, because he's a bear, which they don't know yet, FYI, just kind of fucks off most of the time. Like he's just like not around, but when he is around, it's like really nice. And they go hiking and they play in the water and he like carries Emmeline around on his back. Like it's sweet, it's wholesome. I see the vision. I am rooting for this weird little found family and I am ready for love and nature to transform. Here's what happens instead. Arthur, as a bear, like wanders past the cabin and scares the shit out of Birdie and Emmeline. Now, I don't think I've talked about this yet, but like when Arthur is a bear, he's like full bear. Like no humanity, like doesn't know who he is, like he's a bear. At this point in the story, Emmeline does know that Arthur is a bear. Like she saw him transform and she knows the secret. She doesn't tell Birdie because she doesn't want to ruin the good thing that they have going. So when Arthur eventually returns to the cabin as himself and Birdie like tells him what happened, Arthur completely freaks out and he decides that he is not going to transform anymore. As a result of this, he gets sicker and sicker until finally Emmeline is like, hey mom, Arthur's a bear and we really need to like get him back in his bear suit so that he can be a bear and like get better. And Birdie's like, I'm sorry, what? Birdie finally witnesses his transformation. He like has this bear skin that he literally like steps into. She sees this happen. And it is at this point in the story that Birdie receives one of the most bizarre, most upsetting, most out of fucking nowhere character assassinations I have ever read. I don't know if witnessing this made her go insane, but like from this point on, she starts acting crazy. She becomes completely obsessed with Arthur and his well-being. Before this, like she loved Arthur, sure, but like she never once put him before herself or her daughter. And now, all of a sudden, because he's a bear, she's like obsessed with him. She wants him to come home. She wants him to know that he's still welcome. She starts leaving the cabin door open at night so that he'll just like come home and know that it's okay. She stops lighting fire in the wood place because she's scared that the fire will scare him. She stops cooking and like literally taking care of her child, and she's spending all day in the woods like looking for Arthur and like trying to find him with her binoculars. Whatever negligent mother she was before, it's like cranked up to 100 and it's out of fucking nowhere. It makes no sense whatsoever. At one point, Arthur does come back as the bear, and she approaches him being like, oh, he would never hurt me. And then he takes a swipe at her and mauls her face. And even then, she's like, oh, he didn't mean it. And then she keeps leaving the cabin door open. And then Arthur comes back for a final time, and Birdie chases him down, and he kills her. He just fucking kills her. Emmeline finds the body. And then the last, like, third of the book is Emmeline, all grown up, returning to Alaska, trying to get some closure. I hate this ending so much. I bawled my eyes out when I finished this book, but not in a good way. Like, in a what was it even for kind of way. I am not here to defend Birdie. Like, she was not a good mother in a lot of ways, but I am here to defend her right to a proper character arc. And I will say that Birdie, despite her many, many flaws, did not deserve to be executed in such a horrific and senseless way. Eowyn Ivy returns to the mythical landscape of Alaska with an unforgettable dark fairy tale that asks the question, can love save us from ourselves? No. I guess it can't. Not love for your child, not love for your partner. People can't change. We're all slaves to our worst natures. Like, what exactly am I supposed to walk away with here? Like, yes, sometimes people who desperately want to do better still can't. And that's okay. Like, you can tell that story, but you can't tell that story by completely undermining your own character and pulling that message out of your ass at the last minute. A tragedy needs proper foreshadowing. Like, if you are going to write a character's downfall, we need to see that progression. We need to understand how and why the character failed, where they went left when they should have gone right, and most importantly, how their well-established fatal flaw doomed them. Birdie's fatal flaw was never that she was boy crazy or that she jumped into shitty relationships. Birdie's fatal flaw was that sometimes she was incredibly selfish and blind to how that selfishness affected Emmeline. Just a few chapters before everything happened, before Birdie found out about Arthur, she expresses envy that Arthur is free to come and go as he pleases. Okay, fine. Maybe I'm jealous. Maybe I wish that I could do that. Just wander off whenever, wherever. You don't have to answer to anybody else. It's not, I don't know. I love Emmeline so much. I would do anything for her. She makes me laugh, and I know it sounds crazy, but she's like a friend, you know? We have fun together. Something I didn't have with my mom. And I don't want to be like her, my mom, the way she left us. She was so goddamn selfish. I could never do that to Emmeline. But sometimes I miss myself, just being me by myself. We all go where we please, he says. No, that's not true, because I've got to think of her. You don't know what that's like. It's all on me. Just me. I had no clue before I had her that I would never get a break. Not from her, really, but from having to think about her, worry about her. Sometimes I wish I could walk away, just for a little while. You disappear and I have no idea where you go, and I'm not even supposed to ask. But when you decide to come back, you don't have to wonder where I am, right? Because where else would I be? And so after this, in turn, Arthur gives her a beautiful gift. He says, hey, I'm gonna watch Emmeline, and you're gonna go hiking by yourself. Birdie's like, do you even know how to take care of a kid? Like, have you ever watched a kid before? Like, you gotta feed her and like keep wood in the stove and like keep an eye on her and make sure she's safe. And Arthur's like, yeah, I got it. Like, you're gonna go do your thing, and like, I'm gonna take care of this. And so Birdie just picks a mountain, and she decides that she's gonna hike up the mountain, you know. And so like on her hike off in the distance, she spots some elk, and they're beautiful and majestic. Emmeline would have whined and complained the entire way, and maybe she wasn't even strong enough to make the journey. But if she had been here, Birdie would have said shh and gestured for her to stay low, and Emmeline would have minded. And when the caribou passed by, her eyes would have grown wide. Mommy, I see them. They're just like Santa's reindeer. It was impossible what Birdie wanted. To go alone, to experience the world on her own terms, but also to share it all with Emmeline. Those two passages, that's the heart of the story, or what should have been the heart of the story. Birdie's paradox is that she both rejects the enormous sacrifice that it takes to be a mother, to put another human being above yourself, while also still desperately wanting to be Emmeline's mother and to share everything with her. This should have been the turning point in the novel, the point at which, going forward, Birdie realizes that she needs to put Emmeline's best interest first. Or perhaps she realizes that she just doesn't have what it takes to be a good mother, and that Emmeline would be better off living with her sister, for example. That keeping Emmeline is the selfish act in this case. I want to address a lot of reviews and interpretations that I've seen that this was really about abuse all along. This was really about an abusive relationship. I absolutely hate that for two reasons. One, because if that is what this was, it's just not done well. There's no build-up or indication that that's what's really going on. Arthur never tries to control Birdie. He never belittles her or talks down to her. He never threatens her or so much as like makes her uncomfortable. All the things that would accompany an abusive relationship are absent. The second reason why I hate this interpretation is because the only two times that Arthur hurts Birdie are when he's literally a bear. When he literally doesn't know what he's doing. And do you know how that's different from abusive men? Abusive men do know what the fuck they're doing. Abusive men are not animals, and to equate the two is to imply that they cannot help it. And they very much can. So I reject that interpretation with my full chest, but I also just like don't know what this was trying to do or what it was trying to be. I really wanted this to be a beautiful story about how a messy woman learns to finally become a good mom and to put her daughter first, while also, you know, keeping a little piece of herself. I wanted it to be about how an awkward social outcast is still worthy of love and finding family. And that's just not what I got. It's just not what I got. So 1 star, would not recommend. Next up, I've got The Wedding People by Alison Espach. This was unfortunately another DNF for me. So in this we are following a woman named Phoebe who arrives at a Rhode Island inn only to discover that the entire inn has been booked for a wedding, she being the literal only exception. Phoebe is of course mistaken for one of the wedding people, and she decides to play along because none of it matters. Phoebe has hit rock bottom and she plans to off herself that night after one final indulgence. Phoebe, trapped in the elevator with the bride, flippantly tells her of her plan, and let's just say that the bride gets involved. She takes it very personally. The two of them strike up an unlikely friendship. So there were a few things about this that unfortunately didn't work for me. First of all, I found the characters and the humor to be really grating. Like, I really did not find them charming or funny, and I think that I was supposed to. There would be just these long passages of characters just talking, like not doing anything interesting, like just standing around and talking. Like, so much dialogue. And, you know, like, usually I love dialogue. Everybody loves dialogue. That one girl on TikTok got in trouble because all she reads is dialogue. Dialogue is usually the best part, but this dialogue felt endless. And also, it just felt like it was trying so hard. It's also written in the present tense, and the dialogue tags started to get so repetitive. Honestly, that's what did it. Phoebe says, Delilah says, Phoebe says, Delilah says, like over and over and over again. I couldn't do it. Like, I really couldn't do it. My second big thing is that Phoebe gets over being suicidal, like, awfully fast. Spoiler alert, she doesn't go through with it. The very next day she has a new lease on life, which, you know, that's just like really not how that works. And then the final thing is that Phoebe develops an attraction to someone very inappropriate, and I just couldn't tell where that was going, and it was giving me the ick, and I don't know. I'm so sorry. It wasn't for me. I know so many people love this. I really wanted to, like, I really wanted to, but it just wasn't for me. So I think I DNF'd this. Is my bookmark still in here? No, but this was like 50%. Like, I got pretty far into this and bailed because, yeah, it just was not working for me. So yeah, sorry, I apologize. Then I read The Compound by Aisling Rahl. This is a Love Island-esque reality dating show set in a dystopian future. So all the women wake up in this big house. It's trashed, like there's broken glass and garbage everywhere. There's no furniture, there's no doors even, and they have to wait for the men to like come out of the desert. And so every night you have to share a bed with someone of the opposite sex or you're out. And there's this big screen in the living room with daily communal tasks, so tasks that everyone has to complete, that result in a communal reward. That can range from things that they need to survive, like food and water and supplies, but they can also be really frivolous, like pieces of furniture, jacuzzis, luxury items. But then people can also have their own individual private tasks where you get your own individual reward. So a group task might be, you know, everyone having to hold their breath underwater for a minute, or everyone having to kiss everyone else, or having to vote someone out. A private individual task might be, you know, start a conversation with someone, or tell someone a secret, or go skinny dipping in the pool. You know, stuff that might be embarrassing or that might start drama. And this can add really complex layers to every interaction, because sometimes you don't know if someone is doing something because they want to or because it was a task. So if you've ever read The Long Walk by Stephen King, the dystopian elements of this felt very similar to me in that they are like mostly alluded to. We don't get to see this dystopian world firsthand, but we feel the effects of it in the way that the characters think and act, how hungry they are for nice things, because even if you do get voted off the show, you can keep anything that you can carry with you. And also, the further you survive the show and the more popularity you gain, the more chances for sponsorships you get when you're finally back home. And so our main character, Lily, really doesn't have anything going for her in her everyday life. She's a retail worker, she has no formal education, she's not very smart, but she is really pretty. And so she wields this beauty because this is the one environment where that beauty is powerful, where it gives her status. And she sees this as like her one opportunity to ever do anything with her life. I was really pleasantly surprised by this book. Like, it was weirder and darker and more interesting than I expected it to be. Like I said, the dystopian elements of the world building were in the background, but they were also playing themselves out in the compound. The fact that our characters were having to perform and obey in order to get food and water. It felt like the showrunners would punish them for acts of defiance, choosing to ignore a task to vote someone out, for example. And then, of course, there were really strong themes about capitalistic greed and consumerism and fame and fortune. What would you be willing to do for a diamond necklace, for example? Would you embarrass yourself? Would you ruin a friendship? Would you kiss the wrong person? Would you vote someone out of the compound in exchange for a hot tub? Especially if you knew that you would not be one of the people voted out. Overall, I felt like this book had a really addictive quality. Like, I could not put it down. The stakes get higher and higher as the show goes on and the numbers dwindle. I felt like the characters were surprisingly interesting. There's one character in particular that really could have been a one-dimensional asshole villain, but he had just a sprinkle of nuance, you know, like just enough that by the end you almost feel sorry for him. I've seen a lot of reviews say that they found the ending underwhelming, which I guess I can see. Personally, I liked it. I liked that the house came full circle, which left this very creepy feeling of inevitability. And the very end, which I won't spoil, reminded me a lot of The Giver, which admittedly I have not read in many years and should probably give a reread at some point. That was just the feeling it gave me, the thing it reminded me the most of. A kind of weird, you know, what really happened there type of ending, something that could be open to interpretation. I don't know, I really liked this. I gave it 4 stars. I don't think it's for everyone, but it was a lot more thought-provoking than I thought it was going to be. So yeah, solid. Alright, so now we're getting into the 3 books that I read from my most recent vlog. So first up, I've got The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. So in this we are following our main character, Six. Six is a diviner at a monastery, and she and her other fellow diviners are voices of the gods. In this world, the gods are called omens. There are 6 omens and 6 diviners. And so the diviners divine through this like death sleeping ritual. They drink the blood of the person that they are divining for, and then they drown in this like magical water where they will see a series of visions that is interpreted to either be good or bad. So our story starts when the newest king and his knights arrive. He is referred to as the boy king because he's like only 17, and he has come to seek a divination to see if he will be a good king or not. Among his knights, though, is the fiery Rory, who believes that all of this is just a hoax, that divinations are just a scam and it's basically all made up. This, of course, greatly offends our main character, and so the two do not get off to a good start. They butt heads, they bicker and banter, yada yada. But shortly after the king and his knights go back home, the diviners, one by one, start to go missing. And Six needs to enlist the help of the king and his knights to figure out what the hell is going on. So this is definitely not the worst romantasy I've ever read. I had 2 favorite things throughout the novel. One was the writing and the atmosphere, and 2, of course, was the gargoyle. If you've read it, you know. I found the rest of it to be fairly bland and underdeveloped. Besides the gargoyle, I guess I enjoyed Six the best out of everyone. The thing that she has going for her is that she's like not your typical heroine, but not in a not like other girls kind of way, which is really, really refreshing. So for example, as someone who grew up in a hyper-religious monastery, you would expect her to be pious and naive and meek. And she's not. She's quick to anger, and she's rebellious, and she smokes, and she drinks. But so do all the other girls. So she's not like a special snowflake or anything. When working at the monastery, she does stonework, so she's naturally very strong and, you know, not in an unrealistic way. She's very loyal and empathetic. So yeah, I really enjoyed Six as a character. I enjoyed Rory too at first. I really liked their banter and butting heads, but I do think that it developed into I would do anything for you a little bit too quickly. Like there just wasn't enough of a gradual build to that. And after Rory clearly catches feelings, I feel like he loses a good bit of his personality and like what makes him fun and interesting. That being said though, the romance is otherwise well paced. Like just in the sense that you do have to wait. There is some yearning and almost moments, which I did enjoy. The world building is really underdeveloped though. There are a lot of elements that if you poke at like just a little bit, they fall apart or they don't make sense. I left this book with a lot of unanswered questions, and I know that it's a series and so we might get answers in subsequent books, but there are several questions that I have that I'm not sure I'm supposed to have because the characters themselves don't seem concerned, but I'm concerned. Like, I have questions, I'm concerned, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. I gave this a 3.5. I thought it was fun, you know? Like, I had a good time. I think that I will continue with the series when book 2 comes out. And yeah, I think if you are a big fan of romantasy, you will love this. You've probably already read it if you're a big fan of romantasy. For those of us kind of on the fence, it might be worth a try. A lot of people loved this a lot more than I did. Alright, next up I read When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. A 5-year-old boy sneaks out of the house while his father is sleeping. He wanders down the street to a little free library, and inside is a beat-up old copy of fairy tales. He takes it home because he doesn't actually have any books of his own, but when his father discovers the book, he becomes enraged. He just starts tearing up the house and the little boy flees. Meanwhile, Jess, a struggling actress, is currently working as a waitress in a very shitty diner. On her shift, she gets pricked by a dirty syringe when she's cleaning the bathroom. Instead of going to the hospital like she should, her anxious brain brings her to the safety of her home, where she finds a 5-year-old boy hiding in the bushes outside of her apartment. Soon after, a beast comes rampaging through the neighborhood, killing people left and right. The two go on the run together, but the beast seems to follow them wherever they go. So I really enjoyed this one until the ending. The plot goes at a breakneck pace. It's really weird and really addicting. The mystery is good. There's this constant air of like, what the fuck is going on? I really enjoyed both Jess and the little boy as characters, and especially their relationship with each other. How they learn to work together and to trust one another, and especially how Jess learns to be a caretaker for this little boy. The things that they're up against are definitely really scary. They're also completely bonkers, which I'm not sure is going to appeal to everyone, but I thought it was fun. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle, where the monsters are just like so outlandish and larger than life. So yeah, this was gearing up to be a pretty solid 4-star, but I did not care for the ending, so it did end up getting a 3-star from me. I go into a lot more detail and in-depth thoughts in that vlog, so I'll have it linked at the end. But I was hoping for something a little bit more hopeful, something with more of a found family vibe, and that's not what I got. And then I read Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. Toxic lesbian vampires. We are following 3 different women in 3 different time periods. Maria in 1532 Santo Domingo de la Calzada, Charlotte in 1827 London, and Alice in 2019 Boston. We follow them throughout their lives, throughout history, as their stories interconnect and weave together. This was my most anticipated book of the year from one of my all-time favorite authors, and it was such a disappointment. I wanted to love it. I really, really wanted to love it, and I tried. I really tried. The writing is gorgeous. V.E. Schwab, as always, is a beautiful writer. It's atmospheric. The vibes are on point, but unfortunately, writing and vibes are basically all this book has to offer. So I've always said that I am totally up for a all vibes, no plot type of book, and what I didn't realize until reading this is that all vibes, no plot only works when you have really interesting characters. Maria's storyline started off really strong. She comes from an impoverished background, and we watch as she manipulates and schemes her way into a better life. And when that isn't enough, we see how dark and violent she can be. But very quickly, her story becomes a complete drag, because after becoming a vampire, she no longer wants anything. In a character-driven story, it's the wants and desires of the characters that propel the story forward. Instead, we watch things happen to Maria, people that she happens to bump into and that take her under their wing and teach her things about being a vampire, things that we, the reader, already know about being a vampire. It gets to be so dull, so boring. Charlotte's storyline also starts off really strong. She's a queer young woman living in 1827 London, being trained for her debut, but she finds that she just isn't interested in any of the eligible bachelors. We explore her frustrations at not feeling normal, the loneliness of her family not understanding, her first rejection from a crush, and just like not having any say as a woman in that time period. Like, that's all really compelling until she becomes a vampire. Alice's storyline is okay. She gets turned into a vampire after a one-night stand with a mysterious stranger. To me, her chapters were bogged down by flashbacks with her sister, as well as rehashing all the same learning to be a vampire stuff that we already saw with Maria. Alice is the only one who doesn't choose to be a vampire, and as such is like thematically opposite to Maria and Charlotte. They both more or less chose vampirism, maybe not fully understanding the consequences, but they still chose the freedom that it allowed them. Through becoming vampires, they both gained agency over their own lives. They were able to live as their true selves and decenter men. Alice, because she's living in modern day and because she wasn't given the choice, has her own agency taken away from her by becoming a vampire. This dichotomy could have been a really interesting thing to explore, but do you know what we get instead? A story about a toxic ex. All the themes about freedom, about queer liberation, about agency, completely out the window. All that time, all that history, all that vampire lore, just to tell a story about a toxic ex. When I finished this book, I was trying so hard to like it. I was trying so hard to give V.E. Schwab the benefit of the doubt. I think at the end of my vlog, I gave it a 3-star, but after watching this video by Plant-Based Bride, which I will link down below, I dropped my rating to 2 stars. She puts into words several things about the book that really rubbed me the wrong way, but that I couldn't put my finger on like why they bothered me so much. So, for example, there's a lot of violence against women in this book, which I didn't like, but I chalked it up to V.E. Schwab trying to be subversive. Like, we've seen the whole, you know, woman gets turned into monster and then starts murdering men thing before, and I just thought, like, okay, I guess, you know, she's trying to do something unexpected. But Elizabeth goes over why it's actually really problematic to have a lesbian portrayed as like a literal predator against other women. And there's just a lot more that she goes into in the video, so again, I'm gonna have it linked down below. I would highly recommend watching it, especially if you were as underwhelmed with this as I was. And I will of course also have my vlog linked down there in case you want to hear some of my more in-depth thoughts. But yeah, I think that will just about do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will have that vlog linked here just in case you are interested in watching that, as well as my fall TBR so you know what I'm reading this spooky season. Please like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see more from me. I hope to see you next time. Bye!